Hi, my name's Scott Whimpey and I'm from First Aid Accident Emergency.
Hi, I'm Delina Rahmate and I'm from Fit Dimension Education.
We're here today to talk to you a little bit about Kokoda Challenge, and we come into this with a bit of experience racing with Team CONDEV last year and also this year. And my previous experience in the past is with Team Hammer and first aiding for the event for the last 10 years. So this is my 11th year of being involved with the Kokoda Challenge.
This is my 7th year being involved as a competitor in the Kokoda Challenge, and I've been with a range of teams from 13.5 hours up to a 21-hour team. So I've sort of experienced lots of different things out on course, and I also work as a nutritionist, so I'll be able to help Scott bring you some information on some nutrition tips for Kokoda.
That's good. We've experienced some unusual different ways of nutrition over the years that I've been involved, particularly, and even with our team last year. And it's interesting, I think there's not one set shoe that fits everybody with this, with nutrition and hydration. So please remember, this is general advice, and as always with any of our advice, we like to make sure that people trial this when they're out on the trails and they do actually use it. There's no point trying it for the first time in the Kokoda Challenge or in an endurance event. So we like to make general advice and you try it while you're out on the track.
That's brilliant advice.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So today's talk on nutrition and hydration, we're going to cut it into two. The first component of the talk will be essentially on teams that are wanting to go a little bit faster, and we'll call those the sub 20-hour teams. They're the quickest teams. But how would we sort of sum those teams up, you think?
Those teams tend to run most of the way with the hiking up the bigger hills. So they're generally running a lot, so their nutritional needs are slightly different to the teams that move a little bit slower through the course.
Yeah, and I think that's important as well. When the teams are moving a bit faster, the heart rate's higher, which means the legs and the glutes are being activated. There's a lot of blood in your legs and glutes, and essentially you can't absorb as much into your system. So, you know, more liquid sort of style diets we'll talk about with and nutrition plans and hydration plans with those guys. And then we'll talk a little bit about the teams that are over 20 hours, the majority of the field I would say with those, and how to keep yourself going through that. Okay, so I've done up a bit of a plan from myself last year, which I'll flash up on screen now. And with that plan, guys, I think it's important to remember that with any plans that you do up, that you do allow a little bit of flexibility with those plans, and particularly because things can change in an event like this because it is such a long event. So I think being fluid with a plan is also something that we like to say, being able to adapt and change as you're moving along through. So I suppose let's get into it. I think number one, being able to carry everything that you need is important as well. So sometimes you're a bit of a pack horse when you're out there, and you know, some of the checkpoints I've looked through here, we're looking at, you know, things like 3.5 hours, 4 hours, 4.5 hours between checkpoints. So having enough nutrition and hydration when you're out there is
definitely.
Yeah. So I think, guys, number one, these sorts of packs here are essential. Like, you know, you do get a lot of people that wear the waist belts with the fuels in them, but I think having one of these, which you can pick up from one of the sponsors, which is Wild Earth, this is a great one that I've tried, and again, fitting them and seeing how they go. But essentially, you've got some great pockets on the front, you've got your section in the back which will actually fit your hydration bladder as well, and you can put some other smaller sections in the front for more specific fueling purposes. So something like that, ideal. Okay, so I think to start off with, having a hydration bladder of some sort, whether that's just a 2-litre bladder or a 1.5 litre bladder, but I think definitely above 1.5 litres is important, because, you know, if you're thinking roughly, you're going to be absorbing, I don't know, roughly per hour, 500 mils an hour, maybe around there somewhere.
And it all depends. We all sweat at different rates.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that you need to practice and need to figure out your own personal hydration needs. So one of the things that's good to do is work out your own fluid needs. So we're all very different. Like sometimes when we all run together, some of us sweat more than others. Particularly if you've got more body mass, more muscle mass, you'll sweat a little bit more. So what you can do is before you do a training session, jump on the scales and see how much you weigh. And then drink throughout your training session and then jump on the scales again at the end of your session. Take note of how much fluid you've taken on and then see what the difference still is so in your weight. So you still may be a kilo down even though you may have drunk something. So that's how you can figure out, hey, I actually need to drink 3 litres when I'm out there for 4 hours or whatever the timing is. So it's a good way to know what your personal hydration needs. And we need to make sure that when we go to the toilet that it's not dark yellow to brown. We want it to be more pale and clearer, and that way we know that we're hydrating well.
Yeah, obviously. And guys, a bit of a rough rule of thumb with litres of fluid. Generally speaking, a litre of fluid weighs roughly about 1 kilo. So that's not a bad way to work that out with your litres of fluid as well. But essentially what Delina was saying as well with your hydration, it's important, you know, even the weeks preceding the challenge or any event that you do, you do hydrate very well. We used to say, you know, your urine should be almost clear, but you're probably overdoing it a bit. But just a little bit of yellow in there to know that you are hydrated. And obviously if you're taking things like asparagus or supplements, then that's going to throw that out the window. So just be practical on that and make sure that you drink enough fluids to stay hydrated. I think in my pack, generally things that I will usually use for a sub 20 hour team is a lot of the people don't like to mix too much into their hydration packs because it's hard to tell how much they've actually taken in terms of electrolytes or carbohydrates. But I like to have a little bit of taste in my pack, so I normally just put simple cordial in there in a lot of cases and just a very light mix of cordial in there. In some cases, particularly with shorter events, if that's all I'm using, then I'll mix, say, a 50-50 mix of a sports drink and water. So I've got a little bit of something in there that I'm taking in, just trickle feeding it in.
Yeah. That's a good point. The other thing a lot of people do, and this pack that Scotty showed you is fantastic for fitting a bottle in on the front. So you can actually mix up your electrolyte carbohydrate in a squeezy type bottle and know how much you've got in that, and you'll know how much you've actually gone through. So you can actually measure the amount of food that you've gone through. It's a little bit harder to know if it's in the pack. So a lot of people will have something very simple in the pack, like water or maybe a really diluted cordial, and then they'll have more of their carbohydrates in a separate bottle at the front where they can note how much they're taking on.
Yeah. With your carbohydrate mixes, guys, it's important not to overdo this because obviously if your heart rate's up a little bit, it's going to be hard to absorb it, particularly the sub 20 hour team. So things like gels, if you're having one full gel at once, it's probably too much. So even, you know, guys, these little bottles in the front or on a belt, apart from your hydration pack, you know, you can mix, say, 4 or 5 gels into that, shake it up, and there's 5 gels which could last you for 7 or 8 hours just drip feeding it in. If you put just straight gels in there as a quick tip and don't mix it with any water, then what you will find is then you won't be able to get it out of there. So if you can mix it with water, you can just drip feed that in, and that's a great tip for marathoners as well. If you are having gels, you have one whole gel at once, it's too much in your stomach, you'll start to cramp. Okay.
Yeah, so we know that we can absorb about 90 grams of carbohydrates an hour. So drip feeding that in, like not rather than taking it in a big go at once, is going to sort of drip feed that amount in and allow that maximum digestion out of the gut into that bloodstream where you need it for energy, into those muscles.
So guys, a general thing, just to sum up a little bit about the taking on carbohydrates. Generally speaking, without overdoing it, I won't take the full 90 grams or the full lot of carbohydrates per hour straight out of a gel. I'll still take things like electrolyte sports drink, which might have some carbohydrates in it, sip. I'll take a little bit of gel, and then, you know, things like, what other sort of things could we use, do you think, for some basic carbs?
Fruit's great. So actually this is my favourite, is pineapple. It actually cuts through like that horrible mouthfeel that we might get. It's nice and sweet, but a natural sweet. If the gels are a bit icky for you, you might have to think about how much, but putting it in these little bags, you can measure it out, pop it in your bag, it's ready to go straight away. It doesn't tend to squish up as much as something like watermelon or mango or something tends to go a little bit soggy and hard. Yeah. But the pineapple kind of holds its form, so it's great. And then little things like fruits and nuts, we need to be a little bit aware that if we overdo dried fruit, we actually might cause a little bit of too much fibre going through the system, and it's not so pretty.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Of course.
Yeah. Other bits for fruit, I remember from last year, Delina pulled out a nectarine, and all I wanted was nectarine. So guys, there are a lot of fancy foods and nutrition on the market for sports and endurance sports, particularly like gels and goos and all these different carbohydrate mixes, but you can't go past some of the whole foods. And I think last year was a really good education for me during the event, that some of the whole foods like natural fruits and nuts and the old humble potato, baked potato. We talk about this every year, but a nice bit of baked potato in your mouth with a bit of starch helps to freshen that mouth out a little bit as well. But there's some really good carbs in that. Quarter it up, bake it the night before, into a Ziploc bag, bit of salt, beautiful, really good. You know, your bananas as well. So your whole foods is something that I really would like you to, and Delina sort of educated me on this year, something that we'd really like you to try this year on the trails. And supplementing with things like your gels and your carbohydrate mixes. But you know, if you can work on some of your whole foods, you'll go really well in that area.
Yeah. So sometimes an alternative to is if you're pressed for time, like a whole little natural fruit in natural juice, or even these baby food type mixes that are just a natural puree of fruit. Easy to get down. You can actually put the cap back on, and you know how much you're going to get in it. It's written on the pack. So you can go, okay, I'll need so much per hour. But definitely practice this in training.
Yeah.
You can't just do this on the day. You could run into all sorts of issues. We have to teach our body how to utilise that fuel properly.
Yeah. So okay, so that sort of sums up some of the faster teams or the sub 20-hour teams trail style of mixes. Also mentioning, guys, towards the latter part, or some of those down times, I'd like to call it, like when you're a bit negative and you're struggling, you know, things like Coca-Cola with a bit of caffeine in it, not only does it help you, you know, physically with a bit of energy boost, and please don't just take this the whole way because it's not geared for that. Using it when you need it, it's a bit of an upper as well psychologically, you know. Yeah. It can make you feel a bit more positive. It does get your blood sugars up very high very quickly, and your caffeine level, so you shouldn't be on that the whole time because you'll burn out. But using it when you need to, some of the bigger hills you might need to use it, or if there's a few team members feeling a bit negative, you know, get a bit of Coke into them from time to time, and it can sort of help out in those areas.
And I think sometimes when we start to feel negative, looking at, hey, have I been eating enough on course, or sometimes overeating is also a problem for gut issues. But sometimes we tend to sort of not eat for too long, and then suddenly we don't feel so good, our energy starts to drop, and then we start to get nausea. And sometimes it's from not eating enough, but also taking in, thinking, being too overly sort of cautious and eating too much food, and we just physically can't absorb that and compete at the same time.
And I think a good practice for your team leader or your team captain, or if you're actually looking after the Kokoda youth crew, is every sort of 20 minutes, you know, ask yourself, how am I feeling? You know, how am I going? Do a quick body check. How are my knees? How's my nutrition? Are we right? You know, ask the group, ask the rest of the team, how are you feeling at the moment? Where are you at with your nutrition? Have you been drinking enough? Because when it gets cold, you do tend to stop drinking, and when it gets hot, you tend to drink more. So staying on a fairly even keel, but being a little bit flexible with it.
And I think staying together as a team also helps that, like all being grouped together, working together with all aspects. It's not just about the physical component of the run, walk. It's actually bringing all those things together. The very first year I did Kokoda, someone actually had an alarm. So it beeped every now and then, and that was our drink alarm. And then she'd yell out, drink, and then we'd all sip our drinks. And it was great because I was inexperienced, and it reminded me, and I probably would tend to not drink. So it was really good. So that worked well, having a team captain sort of in charge of that type of thing.
So we've spoken a bit about the trail, being out on the trail with the sub 20-hour teams. You know, guys, I think having that plan and coming into the checkpoints, you know, the later checkpoints, you might even find that you want something warm. If it is through the night, you're hitting some of those 7, 8 o'clock at night sections when you're getting to those last checkpoints. Having something warm, like a you know, a nice warm Milo, like a water style of Milo, or a warm coffee. A soup, yeah, like a nice water style of soup. One of those quick mix soups with a little bit of pasta in it can tend to help a little bit. But essentially, really you are getting into those checkpoints to get everything on your pack so you can make that next section. You don't really want to be spending too long in there eating too much or doing too much with it. Opposite to the above 20-hour teams, I think really the checkpoints are the key to really take on a bit of good quality food and some warm food when you're in the slower teams, because your heart rate's lower and you can absorb a lot more. So, you know, over 20-hour teams, let's have a bit of a chat about that. How would that be different, do you think? You know, like...
Yeah, well, usually because you're doing a lot more walking, you actually are able, for some people their heart rates will be a little bit high because it's the hardest thing that they may have done in their lives, and they'll be a little bit pushed. But so then perhaps you may have to slow down even more to be able to take on food. But because you're out there for so long, up to 38 hours at times, we can't sort of just live on carbohydrate drinks. We need to actually put good food back into our body to help you actually compete better. So having some pre-made, more meal type foods is an excellent idea with good rich sources of carbohydrate put into those. If you're struggling to get things down, that's where the soups and you know, those wetter type things with some whole food in them are a really good idea. And it's warming, especially when you're overnight. It is winter, it does get a bit chilly out there, even on the Gold Coast.
You know, some of the interesting things I've seen out on the trails with the over 20-hour teams have been things like, you know, they'll have a mini quiche, you know, some brownies, freshly cooked by mum and dad. Yeah, some cans of spaghetti, or some spaghetti that's mixed up in a Ziploc bag that they can just tuck into. You know, obviously we'd really like to we're pushing the point of whole foods this year as well. So things like your potatoes and your bananas. But also, you know, if you're mixing the variety of foods and just slowly putting it in, you're not getting what's called nutrition fatigue. And I think with that nutrition fatigue, if you're just having the same gel or the same sports drink the whole time, it's too much, and it's just too much for you. It's really hard to deal with. So
come up with a wide plan. So so you don't go, I'm just going to have gels. Even if you could do it on all gels, that's fine. But actually have some backup foods at the checkpoint, because you might run into the checkpoint and go, all I want is salty food, I can't handle sweet any longer. So you need to have that variety at the checkpoint with your team. So a checkpoint plan.
So that should give you a pretty good idea of what to look for with a sub 20-hour team and what to look for with a over 20-hour team. We have a few, I suppose, X factor tips that we wanted to shed a bit of light on as well. Things like, I suppose, being out there for so long, you know, you're tearing through so much energy, you know, so many, I suppose, electrolytes and fat burning, that cramping is a big one. So, guys, there are a few different ideas and different ways that you can think about cramping, and I think, you know, planning for cramping is something that you do need to do, because it can be pretty tough. It's like planning for first aid and planning for blisters as well. Things like sodium, a bit of salt can sometimes help without overdoing it. You have to be very careful about that. There is a product that's called Toppin that I've used in the past, which has been very, very good.
Yeah, that saved one of our crew last year.
It did, yes. It's a salt tablet, it's a straight sodium tablet. There's about 15 or 20 milligrams of sodium per tablet, which I would probably take once an hour, because I know that I cramp, so I take that. But if you take 3 or 4 of them at once, then you're going to end up with all kinds of issues. You can throw your electrolyte balance out in your body, so that's not ideal.
And particularly if you're getting dehydrated and you're popping too many electrolytes, that'll take you too high in your electrolytes in your body. So it's actually very dangerous.
So anti-cramping is something that we like to cover. Things that are high in potassium and high in magnesium. Things like bananas are good for this. Things like Vegemite, believe it or not. And guys, there is a product on the market which is made by one of our sponsors. It's actually called Electrolytes. This has a magnesium, sodium and potassium mix all in one. It's very similar to what the Tour de France guys use. And it's one of those an hour that we generally would take as well, which actually are a very good product.
Yeah. And the beauty of those kind of products, the actual ratios of sodium to potassium are actually correct. So it's and it's good to look at a professional mix rather than maybe getting something of a cheaper variety that's like just like drinking Gatorade, for example, might not be the right mix as opposed to having like a professional mix in your electrolytes.
Definitely. I think also importantly, guys, if you are predisposed to cramping through longer events, like you've done longer events and you've cramped, and you're just taking this on the day, it's not going to work. I think you do need to load a little bit with this from previous experience. So, the week or the couple of weeks leading in, having a supplement of some sort can also help, but it's something that you do need to consult a nutritionalist about before you go ahead and throw these things into the mix. So please, if you have any questions, you'd need to talk to Delina from Fit Dimensions, and we'll put some information up about her website and what she does with Kokoda nutrition plans and hydration plans for this event particularly.
Yeah, and there's another part to cramping as well. It's sometimes our lack of training, so it's a muscular fatigue issue. So that's why you'll tend to cramp in your legs, because they're being worked beyond perhaps what you've trained. You might have trained some, but not quite enough, and then you're trying to go faster than what you've trained for. So then obviously you're going to run into muscular fatigue issues, and cramping is often a result of that, particularly when you're new to this type of stuff. So it's for the first time you're going to be more vulnerable to cramping than a more experienced athlete.
Pre-training, things like breakfast before events as well. Generally with me, I stick to the basics. With that, I'll have a cup of coffee and a couple of bits of toast. I'll load a little bit with carbohydrates the day before, and also glycogen stores. So I'll have some lollies and some fizzy drinks a little bit the day before to load up with my basic sugars in my system. But there are some other ideas as well, aren't there?
Yeah, so going in a couple of days before, you definitely want to increase your carbohydrate intake. Don't have too much fibre though, because we're already going to have a little bit of an unsettled tummy. So we will actually go to more simple carbohydrates those few days before. And the morning of, if you can get up, I know it's going to be a long day, but if you're going to eat a decent breakfast, if you can get up like those few hours early, that's when you can have more food. If you're waking up at the last minute, you're going to have to go much more simple and more like these types of foods before you head out. But if you can get up fairly early, get like a
You'll be nervous, so you'll want to get up.
Yeah, more decent meal into your body. It will actually serve you well. Yeah.
I think after listening to guys, elite guys like Steve Monaghetti talk about these sorts of things, it's important as well to remember not to change too much. I think if you're trying new things the morning of, you're sort of going out on a bit of a limb. So try and stick to the basics and keep it simple. So if you're going to have some muffins or some toast and a coffee before you go out and do a race, do it before training. Start it now. It's important.
Yeah. So those pivotal training sessions, like your weekend training sessions when you're out there for hours, that's when you practice your race nutrition plan. Yeah,
you practice it very much. You're training for nutrition as well as training for your endurance. Recovering after a training session is also important. To remember that you stay very hydrated. If you've done a 4 or 5 hour session during the day, a bit of couch time is always pretty good, but also absorbing lots of water and some good basic carbs directly after you finish. That's where I find some of these baby foods. I know it sounds funny, but they're only $1 or $1.50. Pumping those down, in the first half an hour after finishing a session, having a banana, having some sports drink,
and even a bit of protein in the mix is going to help the glycogen upload into your muscles. So glycogen's carbohydrate in your muscle, basically, if you're not sure about that. So really important, especially if you are training hard. So for those really fast teams that are going to be training sometimes twice a day, even more sometimes, then they definitely need to get that replaced up nice and fast.
Yeah. So hopefully you've picked a bit out of this, guys, and we do welcome you to come and have a look at our page, Team CONDEV 1, that's on Facebook, and also with Delina's website.
Yep, so I've got 2 websites. One is the nutrition So yeah, delina.com.au. or fiteducation.com.au.
Yeah, so but we'll have all these links up as well. So feel free to shoot us any messages or any questions that you may have, and we'll endeavour to answer those. So we really look forward to seeing you out on the trails. We've been out doing a fair bit of work already at this point in time, and obviously we want to do quite well this year. And as a major sponsor, we're also happy to share information and get it out there. So all the best with the Kokoda Challenge for 2017.
Thank you.